test. If the user makes an error, our application shows the user where the mistake was made, as well as suggesting the point they need to return to in order to complete the test. Now that the patient has completed a test, we can compare their performance to what is expected for their age group, education level, and gender. The application provides graphs for this data, which allows doctors to easily assess the results. SmartStrokes also allows patients to take a clock drawing test and the Ray Alström test. Both of these involve recreating a certain image. Our application allows doctors to share the test with other doctors or replay it at a later time. Here is an example replay of a clock drawing test which was taken earlier. With all of the advantages that SmartStrokes provides, the application can have a lasting impact on the medical community and improve the lives of those affected by strokes.
So to give some background on some of the cognitive tests that we implemented in our project, we considered many. There are actually a lot of these tests. We discussed with Dr. Nancy Leslie, a neuropsychologist who works in the Health Sciences Center here at Texas A&M, suggested 3 tests to us that she would find useful in her work. The first is called the trail making test. So in this test, the goal is to trace a series of nodes in a particular order, in version A being from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 and so on, and in the version B from 1 to A and 2 to B until you reach the last letter. So the goal of this test, it provides the ability to test for the perception and planning of the patient. One important characteristic is that it can help show the presence of a hemispatial neglect, which is an inability to process stimuli on a certain side of the body. So a patient who suffers a stroke may not be able to see nodes that are on the left. And so if they consistently take time finding nodes on the left, they may have a left hemispatial neglect. The second test we implemented is called the clock drawing test. In this test, the patient is asked to draw a clock face, given only a circle, and they must draw the numbers of the clock and set the time to 10 past 11. This can be difficult for some patients because although the time contains the word 10, it doesn't actually point to the number 10. It can also help show planning on the side of the patient if they anchor their positions of their numbers by meeting with her more often or having a more direct line of communication than just email probably would have helped us be more efficient about it.
Do you think switching to Agile helped that? I noticed when you guys switched from Waterfall to Agile.
And as part of Agile, meeting with the customer a lot is important, so that would have been better if we could have.
I'm sorry, one other question. Where was the actual testing of the software? Did you guys test the UI? Did you test the back end? And there was some challenges. Did you test the actual software?
So the actual testing of the software, we took it to Dr. Leslie, and she actually tested the whole UI. She took all the tests herself to make sure that that's what the patients would want. The back-end testing, it was thoroughly tested by all of us who needed it for various parts of it. So we're pretty sure the back-end works. The UI was also tested by all the 30 plus people between 18 to 69 that we tested up in the lab here and at the Memorial Student Center. And it was tested various times on actual people, like they would be the patients who would take the test. Does that answer your question?
You asked the question that it was tested, yes.
Separate question. You said that the user interface, how was that designed initially? I heard that you changed some of the nodes later, and you changed the buttons. So what kind of input did you have, or did you have any input into what that user interface would look like before you designed it?
Dr. Leslie gave us a paper copy of all the tests. However, on the device, the piece of paper is much wider than the actual surface. We wanted to keep it in the same portrait mode, so it was wider. We didn't want to put the nodes too close to the boundaries, but it turns out we put them too far away from the boundaries. So people, if they wanted to go around it on the outside, we thought that would be something they may want to do, but they didn't want to. So we spread those out. We tried to make it look exactly like the actual paper test as much as possible.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there a way to actually make it proportional so that the test can remain, so to speak, valid? I'm sure they put that test in such a way to where they planned for the kids to get a piece of paper.
We kept it as proportional as possible, but if we made it fully proportional, it was actually too small. that's what we had the first time. And there were errors on the test. And some of them were like line here, 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 here. Like they were just way too close together. So we tried to keeping the proportions the same way, tried to spread them out as much as was allowed.
Anything you learned from this testing in terms of security, in terms of maybe data looked over where somebody else couldn't see the data that shouldn't have been? So a lot of, you have a doctor role to probably message the demographics and results, but anything you learned around that from the testing that you did with the student?
Well, initially, I suppose we didn't consider it as much as we should have initially before the first time we took the application to Dr. Leslie. From that point onward, we discussed it with her, and she told us that there no names are ever stored. It wasn't something that we knew initially that she wouldn't want to store the names or more information about the patients, but she made it very clear to us that it was only supposed to be an identifier that she could keep track of. So I suppose it was something of a learning experience on what kinds of information doctors would prefer to store on computers outside of their own systems.
What kind of defects did you guys find in UI and in the back end? In your testing?
Like we talked about earlier, some things were not as usable as we wanted them to be. So we had a significant amount of thought dedicated to, like once we gotten feedback that it could be difficult for the average user because we were designing more for like our own use and not considering the average user as much, which would like stroke patients are often older and much less familiar with technology.
So you have usability, but what about functioning? Does it just work perfectly the first time?
We had errors along the way.
It crashed in the first user study.
Yeah.
We tried giving it to someone to take 2 tests in a row, and it just went kaput and died. So we had to fix that. Other than that, actually, surprisingly, it did do really well.
We did have issues upgrading the saving and loading of the test replays. That we often we didn't really design the actual files that stored the test replays particularly well, and so every time we wanted to add on to that, we'd have to manually adjust the files themselves, and so that was kind of not really a usability defect, but that was certainly something we
Sure,
should
but that's more functional.
that was more of a functional issue that we should have thought about. And I think it's scalable.
I think we've got time for one more question.
I think we don't have time.
So,
Let's go ahead and thank this group.